Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl. Welcome to our 2025 Best Picture Revisiting series.
Here are the 10 nominees for Best Motion Picture of the Year.
Anora.
The Brutalist.
A Complete Unknown.
Conclave.
Dune, Part 2.
Amelia Perez.
I'm Still Here.
Nickel Boys.
The Substance.
And Wicked.
And on today's episode, we'll be discussing Palme d'Or winner Anora, which racked up 6 Academy Award nominations. And we are joined by a very special guest in front of the channel, the master of Oscar science, Ryan Castleman.
Welcome into the episode that I have been anticipating the most. An episode that I have been waiting to make all the way since May when I saw this at the Cannes Film Festival. Today we are talking about Anora, one of the most beautiful, heartfelt films of this year. Clearly, I love this film, but I want to hear what you guys think. Anora, potentially our Best Picture winner.
Yeah, and I guess to say I've had a very strange journey with Anora so far because you hear so much praise, so much admiration for a film. Your expectations are going to be so high. I mean, Matt, it's one of his favorite movies of the year. He saw it before a lot of people did, so I've heard so much praise from the very start. The first time I saw this was at the Philadelphia Film Festival. It was opening night. There was so much buzz in the air, and I had to say I really enjoyed the movie, but I didn't think it was like the best of the year. I had some issues with the pacing, especially I thought the back half was a little sluggish, but the performances and screenplay were fantastic. Fast forward about a month, I saw at the Virginia Film Festival, and a lot of those issues were resolved. My expectations were more grounded. Maybe I was skewed a little bit because Mikey Madison was like 5 feet away from me during the movie and then for a Q&A afterwards. But it worked for me. And now on this third viewing at home after so many months, I've kind of in the middle of the two. There's still a lot to love, but there are a few little issues. But the acting is fantastic from top to bottom. The screenplay is packed with jokes. It's so witty. And Anora is one of the best pictures of the year. And I'm very excited for this episode. But Ryan, what are your thoughts on Anora?
Well, Sean Baker is one of my top 3 filmmakers working today. And when I heard Sean Baker won the Palme d'Or, I was over the moon. However, I always keep my expectations at bay because the Florida Project's really the Florida Project to me is one of my favorite films of the last 10 years. So I felt like destined to be disappointed. And when I caught up with the Nora at TIFF, I finally did see what all the buzz was about. Like, yes, it's a story that has that key characteristic of a Sean Baker movie. It's a story about the marginalized or often looked down upon member of society, but he begs the audience to look a little deeper at these people. However, Sean Baker surprises us with his filmmaking abilities. He expands his canvas a little bit, displaying an incredible control, I think, over the pacing and the tension. And Anora turns this kind of rom-com genre and screwball comedy, he turns it on its head. And I was ready to chop this up, though, ultimately, as being kind of just a good time. A good Sean Baker, but not a great Sean Baker. But then the last 10 minutes came, and it kind of bumped that movie up to a 10 for me. It just really resonated with me over time, and it was deeply effective. So, yeah, Florida Project still holds a special spot in my heart. It's still my favorite Sean Baker movie, but Anora is easily my favorite film of this year. So I think it'd be a very fantastic Best Picture winner. And what a cast. The cast is amazing.
I completely agree with you. For me, Florida Project turned me into a Sean Baker fan. Before then, I wasn't really on his wavelength. I'd seen Tangerine. I didn't really like it when I first saw it. I've turned around on it since, going back after seeing Florida Project. But Florida Project is such an exercise in radical empathy. It is such a beautiful film that really does ask you to look into a subject matter that you would normally pass right by. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. That movie ruins me. Still my favorite Sean Baker movie, like you said, but I do think that Anora is Sean Baker's best movie. Despite the fact that Florida Project holds a special place for me,
Yep.
This one does everything that movie does. And it brings it hits, and it just hits all the right notes. It's doing all the right things to make you feel, to really put you in that position of deep radical empathy for its characters. I can remember sitting at Cannes and watching this for the first time, and when the credits rolled, that spectacular final scene and it cuts to black, I could feel the entire theater kind of let out a sigh. And at that moment, I put it as my number one in Best Picture. And I did not move it until after Oscar nominations when I briefly said, oh, Emilia Perez. But now it's back at number one, baby. But from the first moment that I saw it, I knew this had something. This is the type of movie that people watch with their hearts. It makes you laugh as much as it makes you cry. And I think that's a really special part of this movie, that it's just so heartfelt and powerfully done. Despite the fact that it's also a goofy screwball comedy, it shattered me. Absolutely shattered me with its depiction of the American dream and the way that we're told that we can climb up, but that chance really is never real. It's a dream because one day you have to wake up. I love this movie just like you, Ryan.
And I mean, we were supposed to record this video about a week ago, and I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because the last few days have really turned the tides in Anora's favor. It won Best Picture at Critics' Choice, it won the DGA, it's won the PGA, and all the way back at Cannes, like Matt mentioned, this shot up the races in terms of the Best Picture candidacy. And throughout the year, it's spent a lot of time as most people's projected winner, but it's had some variance. It's dropped down a little bit, it's come back, and then it's dropped down again. But now we're firmly with a lot of guilds coming out for support for this film to be our Best Picture winner. So I guess I turn over to y'all now. How has the race been for this overall throughout the season? And do you think it has the juice to really go the rest of the way, or will SAG or BAFTA really turn us astray to something else?
Well, I'll just say, like Matt, when I first saw Anora at TIFF, I also put it number one because I thought it had that juice to really meet the middle of that kind of what you need for a preferential ballot, right? It's going to appeal to the art lovers and it's going to appeal to general audiences. This is finally an Oscar movie that I feel is very artistic and I can show to my parents. That's the kind of film that wins Best Picture. So, and you can play the tape. Go back and watch my early review. Play the tape. You can see I'm over the moon. I think it's going to win. And I don't say things willy-nilly. I really, when I project it and put it on the world, I really believe it. I thought Jacques Audiard would maybe get snubbed. I really believe that, believe it or not. So I don't just, and that obviously was completely wrong. But I was right about this, and I know what I see when I see it. But yeah, I think the race has just been amazing. I mean, it did falter a little bit right there, right, with Globes and then Critics' Choice only awarded Best Film. But man, did it come back, and it came back strong. And I feel great. I don't think SAG or BAFTA could really. I just don't think SAG or BAFTA is really gonna turn this race around.
Something that I've been saying all along and for years really is you can't win Best Picture if your movie appeals to people's brains more than it appeals to their hearts. And that's what I've been saying all along with The Brutalist. It's a movie that I think people have to think much harder about than feel it in their core. But for Anora, from the first second that I saw it, I knew that was a movie that people would feel. That was a movie that would hit people right in the chest. And that's why I've held it for the entire year as that number one choice. Again, up until very recently when I strayed for a little bit, but I'm back on board. But to me, it's an interesting case where I feel like so many people have been predicting this as Best Picture for such a long time that it would be easy to think at a certain point, something else has to take over. At a certain point, we have to get fatigued by this. And it really seemed like we were getting that sort of front runner fatigue that we often see. But it turns out that throughout the season, there have been opportunities for people to love other movies more. And it just keeps coming back to, no, people really love this movie. They feel it with their entire soul. And nothing else has become an alternate. There's been no movie that's come forward and shown this is the movie that people love more. And I think that's why we're here right now. It's just endured while no other movie has been able to present a similar case.
What, you afraid of this little girl?
She's an animal.
She's a fucking little girl. She beat you both up? When'd you guys meet, huh? When did you meet him?
Strip club. Stop screaming! Please stop screaming! Please stop screaming!
Everything will be okay.
So we talked about its Best Picture nomination. Why don't we dive into Anora's plethora of nominations, kicking things off with Best Director, which, I mean, we just had that shocking surprise at the DGA, Baker taking that prize. But, I mean, I think he has a very distinctive visual style across all of his films, at least the ones that I've seen so far. And it's one I like and enjoy for the most part. And then I guess my next point comes more to my overall reception of this movie and some of the other movies in our Best Picture race. But it's a little odd for me to see that people kind of like take shots, I guess, at Edward Berger's direction or James Mangold's directions in their respective films, when I feel like Baker can kind of be in that same category if they're all doing one thing very exceptional inside of their film, which then elevates their film to another level. Mangold, it's the way that he captures these live musical performances. Berger's the way that he blocks his characters. And then here for Baker, it's the way that he allows his actors to really go above and beyond to new heights by encouraging him and doing all the Sean Baker mannerisms that we know from his previous works. And I feel like they all had the opportunity to really be the odd one out at respective award shows throughout, but I think this goes back to Matt's last point about the love for Anora and how everyone is down for this movie. And every place it's had the chance to falter, it shows no, we're strong, we're good, we're here. And now we're to this point where Anora probably is going to go on to win our Best Picture and maybe even win our Best Director award. And this is not my favorite direction from Baker so far throughout his career, but I think it's great work inside this film. He has so many distinctive visual and creative styles on full force inside of Anora. I really like the way his camera moves throughout, and I think this would be a very worthy nomination, and if it goes on to win, a very worthy win.
I gotta fight you on something there, Dylan. I'm sorry, I gotta fight you. Comparing Sean Baker's direction to James Mangold, Edward Berger, I don't know if I can get down with you on that. I mean, sure, on one level, Sean Baker's direction has never been visually flashy. That's not what he's doing. But at the same time, you know, the reason I've taken issue with James Mangold as a directing nomination, why I took issue with the idea of Edward Berger as a directing nomination, is because both of those are really solidly made, technically accomplished movies, but neither of them would you ever watch and go, oh, that's a James Mangold movie. I can tell by the way it is, it's a James Mangold movie. Or Edward Berger, you know, you would not watch All Quiet and then watch Conclave and go, undeniably, these are made by the same person. I think that Edward Berger and James Mangold are both excellent gun-for-hire directors. Even when they're making their own projects, they still sort of shoot it as though anyone could shoot the movie. And it's technically accomplished work, but it's not a voice. It's not an auteur voice. Whereas Sean Baker, even though his work isn't as visually complex, you know, that's not what his movies are about. I can watch a Sean Baker movie and know within 2 minutes this is a Sean Baker movie. It's the way that he frames things. It's the way that he lets his characters move through the world. It's even down to the way that he writes things and the way that he allows characters to show their emotion. There are distinct trademarks that Sean Baker has that show up throughout his entire filmography. And I think all of those trademarks that he has are at full play here. This is the distinct work of a filmmaker who clearly has a vision, clearly knows exactly what he wants, and clearly has an identity as a filmmaker that makes him different from everyone else. So even though I agree, I don't think that I would make him my winner just because some of the work isn't as flashy. You know, I feel like when we think of Oscars, when we think of Best of the Year, oftentimes we lean towards most instead of best. This is definitely not the most direction. But at the same time, it's distinct and it's unique and it deserves its place in this category as much as Brady Corbet does.
I think he does what a lot of up-and-coming filmmakers can learn from, which is when he makes a movie about an important issue or subject, he's talked about this before. He doesn't really lead with that. Along with authenticity, he leads with the story. He leads with comedy. He understands that the best way to change your heart and mind on a certain person is to engage with you on an entertainment level first. And I think that's just an incredible quality that he has, because I've always said his films never feel overly pretentious, which I love. I love that it's a film that you feel like I love that it's a film that is completely accessible. So yeah, and also Sean Baker's been building to this moment, right? He's been shooting on iPhones on Tangerine, and I never thought that the Academy would ever take notice of Sean Baker, but thank God they did. Thank you, Palm d'Or, for making them turn their head.
I think in a year where we're talking a lot about authenticity in filmmaking and about respecting your subject matter, Sean Baker's a great example of respect for a subject matter. And while not being authentically representative of what he's talking about, he puts the work in to learn, right? When we're talking about Jacques Audiard speaking about Mexico and saying, I didn't need to go to Mexico. I know everything I need to from watching films, or, not
Yeah,
hiring.
he saw Traffic.
Yeah,
saw Traffic. That's all.
exactly. He saw Traffic. He saw Breaking Bad. That's all he needs to know. It's so important to see someone like Sean Baker who proves that you don't necessarily need to be from or a representative of a certain group to be able to authentically represent them. Because what he does is he puts the care into the research. He speaks with people who are a part of these stories. He listens. He is open to learning. He goes into the different communities that he's representing on film, and he spends time there. So although he might be a 50-year-old white guy who has presumably never been a sex worker, he authentically, I think, coming from a perspective of also not being in this community whatsoever, but I've heard a lot of people who are in that community say that they felt it was an authentic portrayal and a respectful portrayal. And it's because he takes the time to listen and to learn. And I think that's something that really is needed in the discourse around this, because I for one am not really a fan of the whole discourse around you can't make a story unless you've lived that story. I don't agree with that really, because I think we've seen time and time again filmmakers beautifully do so. What it takes is the patience and the time and the respect to give it the attention it deserves.
I mean, you talk about putting the energy, putting the attention, and the dedication to pull something off like this. I mentioned I went to a Q&A where Mikey Madison was in attendance to move over to lead actress. I feel like she really does encompass a lot of these trademarks of what people in those communities do on a day-to-day basis. And if you didn't know who Mikey Madison was before, you could maybe realistically believe that Sean Baker had plucked someone from that community and put them as the starring person in their film, because we've seen her steal a show in Scream. She's in one of the most memorable sequences out there in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and now in Anora, I feel like she really has this opportunity to do them both because she's hilarious and her screen presence is really magnetic. And even though I do have some small issues with her character as a whole, you can't help but keep your eyes on her throughout the entirety of this film. And I really appreciate what I was talking about earlier of how committed she is inside of this role. You can tell that she's done the research, she's put in the energy, she's put in the effort to make this feel very authentic, because throughout the movie, we have so many instances where she gets to show off her fun side, especially earlier on, and her smile, and you can see her enthusiasm for hanging out with Vanya, but then she has some quieter moments while still out and partying where you can see Vanya's just throwing away so much money because he has endless amounts, and you can see, like, wait, what are you doing? I'm so concerned. And the more and more that we go in throughout the film, we can see her character kind of shift a little bit more from being so optimistic to being a little bit more cautious, and then really taking things into her own direction as we further go in. And part of that's the screenplay, part of that is Madison's performance, because I think she's just doing a great job inside this role, and it's one that makes me so excited to see where she goes next inside of her career, because I feel like this is a great building block where maybe she stays inside this comedic role, or maybe she goes to something more dramatic. But it's nice seeing someone that you've seen around the block a little bit for a few years getting just a breakout moment like this.
No, I've heard the criticism too, the one about Mikey Madison's character Ani, and we never really fully understand her character. And I understand that. By thinking about it, it wasn't a problem for me while watching the film, but I do kind of understand that to a certain degree, in the sense that we don't really understand how she got to the strip club, or how she ended up working there, or what's her situation that landed her in that club. We don't understand where she's going to go after this movie is over, but I there's something about it that I still like about that. I like that there's human beings are very complex people. We don't really know why we do a lot of the things we do. But I just love her performance in this. I love that it feels that she was plucked off the street. It feels very authentic, and we never understand her motives. Is she seeking love? Is she seeking a lottery ticket to a luxurious life? is she seeking both at the same time? I love the complexity. I love not knowing exactly what her motives are. You know, she's business savvy. She knows how to handle herself, but it's this second half also where her dreams come crashing down and her being able to play both notes at the same time. Someone who's trying to maintain that toughness, but also someone whose heart is kind of breaking right in front of our eyes. I thought it was lovely to see, especially in that second half. I think her performance really comes to life in that second half and is very detailed, and just in every expression that she shows, I think it's just incredible work.
This is by far my favorite performance of the year. Mikey Madison completely captivated me the entire time. The scene that I keep going back to, what I think her Oscar clip should be, is the scene where her and Vanya are sitting in bed and she's asking him, "What did you do to get all of this?" And what we can tell she's asking, she's trying to figure out if she's gotten herself into danger. She's trying to figure out if this guy's a drug dealer, an arms dealer, what illegal shit he's done to get all of this while being 23 years old. And the thing that I love in that scene is that you can see in her eyes that she can't even begin to grasp the idea that this guy was given every single thing that he's ever had. You know, she is someone who has worked her ass off for every single dollar that she's ever had. You know, she is someone who presumably, it seems like at least, lived with a single mother who worked paycheck to paycheck to raise Annie and her sister. And the thing that I love in her eyes in that scene is she can't even comprehend the world that he's from, the same way that he can't comprehend the world that she's from. And there's this break in empathy between the two of them that even though as an audience we can feel deeply about these characters, they cannot step into each other's shoes. And she just plays that so beautifully. And something you said, Ryan, as well, that I connect with deeply in this character is the shells that she puts on. You know, she is a soft, squishy interior with a really hard shell that she's wearing on the outside. Her character is a turtle in a way. You know, you can't break through that outside, but every once in a while you see it peek out. You see the tears coming through. But she has to stay strong. She's street smart. She's gritty. She's going to fight like hell to make sure that she keeps her spot, because that's how she was raised. That's what she's always needed to do to survive in this world. But really, she is just a kid with the same Cinderella dream as anyone else.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. And I said it wisely.
Three carrots.
What about 4? Or 5? Or 6?
And I think a lot of that goes to the screenplay as well, because Sean Baker's writing here is what gives life to all of this. His dialogue is hysterically funny. Some of the exchanges between the characters are side-splitting. But beyond all of that, it's the balance between those heavy moments and the shell of a comedy. You know, it's the exterior of something that is going to make us laugh. But every once in a while you peek between the cracks and it's emotional and deeply affecting. And it has so much to say about the American dream. And like I have kept saying, sort of the lies of the American dream.
Yeah, I think the screenplay, like you said, it's so fun. It's filled with so many jokes, but it also has this really vibrant energy that keeps you engaged and chugging along with the story with a pretty good pace. I think that the opening 30, 40 minutes of this film, I know there's some people, as Ryan was mentioning, that has a little bit of issues with how Madison's character has really got into the club. But for me, the mystery of it all is what makes it so engaging and thought-provoking, as you get to make those decisions and connections by yourself. You're just here with her. You see her in her natural element, and you see her kind of hustle in and out with various different customers until she finds, as y'all both said, this potential golden lottery ticket to the high life. And I really like how the screenplay kind of plays and toys with that idea, especially earlier on. We see them celebrate, we see them party, we see them have fun, but they never really get to know each other. They never really get to talk. It's just about spending money, doing fun things, and making memories. And then they go off to Vegas, and everyone always says what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but they decide, why don't we break that rule, and why don't we marry, get together, and that way we always keep Vegas with us and keep these fun times rolling. And I really like that aspect and dynamic that it builds upon there. I could point to some issues for me personally with the script is when we get into the back half after the amazing home invasion sequence, which to me is the absolute pinnacle of this film. I know Matt and I have discussed this before, and we're kind of on different sides of this. I find the first half of this movie to be the highlight of it, and I find the search for Vanya to be a little bit repetitive and kind of drilling in the same aspects again and again, kind of something, I guess, Matt, that you were feeling with I'm Still Here after the big occurrence of that film. It's just the flip side with this, where the movie's not an issue, it's not a fault, it's not a major negative. I just don't have that same euphoric high that like Annie and Vanya were feeling themselves, and that maybe that's by design with the screenplay to really drill in the points and the themes, but as a viewer, it just wasn't as engaging or impactful. But upon every rewatch, to a point Ryan made it very early on, the ending has gotten more clearer and more better for me upon each time. And this most recent watch, I think the ending hit the hardest it has for me throughout all of my watches.
Pick up what you were saying. The first thing I noted when I watched Anora was really just how natural everything sounded. Like you guys mentioned, Anora turns into kind of a romp where all this hilarious chaos ensues, but Sean Baker's able to do all of this while maintaining a truthfulness within the characters. I didn't feel like a single line in this movie rang false to me. Everyone said exactly what I feel like they would say in that given moment. And I feel like Sean Baker's writing can often go overlooked in his films because they feel very improvised, but I feel like it's designed to feel that natural. And it's just a really testament to how lived in and how much attention to detail the dialogue gets with having it sound natural. And kind of talking what you said on my second viewing about the pacing of that kind of second half into the searching for Vanya, I did feel that a little bit. I did, but part of me was also like hungry for that Sean Baker. Like I love when he really inhabits the space of whatever location he's filming on. Like Florida Project, we have that castle, and we have these kind of all these little places outside that castle that he explores. I love getting to know this whole community. So I was kind of missing that a little bit in this film. But then when he kind of expands out and we get to see that pier where he goes to that candy shop and we meet this weird couple and there's this old guy who works in the back, like these are kind of those little details like I was missing from the movie. And in that section, it kind of provided me, and we kind of expand out and we get to see New York and a little bit more than just the mansion and the strip club. So I do see what you're saying a little bit with the pacing. It does kind of lull a little bit. Also, I'm kind of like exhausted by that point. There's been a lot of screaming and yelling. So I'm kind of looking forward to kind of settling into the winding search for Vanya. I kind of enjoyed that, but I do understand what you're saying to a small degree.
Something that just holds the screenplay together for me is the focus on and the use of the subject matter, and specifically talking about sex workers as a representative of American capitalism, as a transactional environment where, beyond just the transaction that's happening between Vanya and Annie, every single person in this story in some way is benefiting from a transaction or is a part of a transaction. That you have all of these Russian guys who are hired by the family, who are pretending to be friends of the family, but really they're being paid. They're hired people, and everyone has to follow the money. Everything is a transaction. Even Vanya being the son of his parents, that's a transaction. He has to do what they say or else the money is going to dry up. And so the thing that I loved about this movie more than anything else was the focus on how every single relationship comes down to monetary value going one way or another. And in that way, how there's one relationship in this that is not dependent on money, which is the relationship between Igor and Annie, the Yuriy Borisov character. And the thing that breaks my heart so much in the ending, before we get into Yuriy Borisov's character, the thing that breaks my heart is throughout the story, we've seen the way that Igor treats Annie is clearly without any expectation of reciprocation. And yet, the heartbreaking thing that happens in that final scene when she gets on top of him, has sex with him, and then cries is that she's reciprocating the kindness that he gave the only way that she knows how, in a transactional manner, as if everything that he's done for her is with the expectation of getting something back. When in fact he's likely the only person in this film that is not expecting a monetary transaction for an act of kindness or an act of good. But let's talk Yuriy Borisov, because this is a nomination that I think is one of the coolest things the Academy has ever done, who has maybe 4 or 5 lines in the entire movie, barely speaks at all, is kind of just a silent force throughout the movie. And here he is, not even just getting an Oscar nomination, but every single nomination through the season. I'm here for it. This is a nomination that I've been incredibly enthusiastic about. Yuriy Borisov, one of my favorite performances of the year, because like I was saying, you can just see in his eyes that sort of silent kindness, that silent acceptance, not wanting anything back from her. I just love it. And you could say maybe it's the writing, but I think it's all grounded by that quiet confidence coming from Yuriy Borisov. So one of my favorite nominations of the year, hands down.
I mean, every single character in this film is so fleshed out. It's so great. Every actor in this film is fantastic. You could have pulled out any one of the other supporting actors and nominated him, and I would have been happy. I would have enjoyed to see double dips, Mark Edelstein or something. I would have loved to see that too. What you kind of talked about earlier about Yuriy Borisov and how he's kind of the beating heart, he does have an advantage, right? Because when you walk out of that movie, it's really, he leaves the lasting impression on you with Annie. So it kind of makes sense that he is the one who's recognized from this. And I really am glad he was. He would have been the person I would have pulled out and recognized from this film. But yeah, I mean, on the first watch, I really loved his character, but my appreciation of his performance really got richer on that second viewing. Not only is he subverting your expectations of what a goon typically is, and that's also with Sean Baker's incredible writing. Side note, the way that Sean Baker writes goons, I when I saw the goon characters, I was like, oh gosh, we're gonna get some goons that are not gonna have personalities. But man, Sean Baker infuses personalities, very distinct personalities for every single person. I love that. But Yuriy Borisov in particular, watching him, watching the film kind of shift from being about Annie and Vanya to being about Annie and Igor was just lovely. And the film's ending is all the better because of all the groundwork I think that Yuriy is doing throughout the film. It's all there. If you go back and look at it, you can see all this kind of subtle acting he's doing. He's always looking out for Annie. And I find it very moving on that second viewing. So yeah, I'm really happy to see him being recognized. Never thought I was skeptical whether the Academy was going to go for it. But when he's just kept popping up again and again, it was like, yes, let's do it. I was so happy for him.
This is my most proud called shot of the year, because I think back in May, I put him in my supporting actor lineup. And I remember talking to you, Dylan, about it, and you being like, you're fucking insane at this point. What are you doing? But, in a year where I've had so many terrible called shots, it's really nice to have one that's stuck with me all year.
Well, what's the cool thing about this is the reason why I had that reaction to it is because you were the only one, at least at that point, who was really pushing that narrative. And I remember I even went on to Awards Expert and was like, there's not one single other person here. That's why I was so, taken aback by it, because when you first watch Anora, and this is the reaction I had, so I kind of fall into that majority there, is you're going to notice Mark Edelstein more. He's more showy, he has more lines of dialogue, he commands the screen more throughout the beginning part of the film. At least to me, that's the more engaging part. But I think what both of y'all said there for Yuriy Borisov's nomination for Igor is a really cool thing. It's so... in this year of the Academy, where we have so many branches going out of their typical box to nominate things that we never would expect from them, I mean, we have Borisov here in the acting branch. We have the substance getting in across the board. We have so many weird, out there, fun nominations like Nosferatu getting a bunch of noms, where these are all films or performances where a few months ago we'd be like, no, that would never happen. And it's just showing the growing change of the Academy. But I guess I have to be a little bit of a bearer of bad news. He's not the one who I would pick of the ensemble here. And I think for me, it's more so like, if no one told me to look for the things, and this goes to more so me as a viewer than the performance or either of y'all's viewing habits as well, I probably would not pick up on a lot of this stuff, but I'm happy that you two were able to pick up from it, because for me, I would probably leech more to like Edelstein or Karen Cooligan, who plays Toros. I think they both have a little bit more memorable moments throughout the film, and maybe their performances are more loud, shouting acting, which is really going against some of the things Matt and I have talked about in our recent episodes here, praising a lot of the more quieter, subtle little performances. But I don't know, I think back to this film as a whole, and especially for acting for me, I usually go back to what specific scenes jump out the most to me, especially when I'm considering those supporting performances. And I think back to the home invasion sequence. And while Borisov is present and he has a very integral moment in those, as Ryan was saying, those moments are more setting up things for later on down the film, while inside that sequence, Toros is commanding the screen and is delivering so many laughs and physical comedy moments throughout that I would lean more towards personally. But I don't think this is a bad nomination. I think it's a very cool nomination. It's a very inspired one, and I hope this leads to the Academy going further down the line is with this, and with Isabel Rossellini over in Conclave, true supporting performances getting recognition in their categories, and more space for them, because this year we have like one, maybe two in each category. Hopefully next year maybe we can get to like 3 or 4 in each category, and it's just one lead in supporting it instead of being 2 or 3 leads in each category.
Your character being Mark Edelstein. That's something that I can totally accept personally, because you can pick any member of this cast and I'll be like, perfect. I love them too. I love every single person, every single character in this movie. So yeah, I'm all happy. Anytime someone mentions a favorite performance, doesn't matter. Pick your character. I enjoy them all.
I want what he had. I want one of those. Did you fucking hear me? I said I want one of those.
No.
No? What the fuck, why?
Because I don't know, job.
Over in the editing category, this is a very interesting nomination, because on the surface, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on here. But something that I really took away from the editing was the way that Sean Baker gets around montage. You know, normally in movies like this, we think of those quick cuts between people doing crazy things, and it's just, you know, those montage sequences that are so familiar from Hollywood filmmaking. And he does a lot of that, but in a different way, where it's slightly longer sequences. You know, it'll be kind of cutting in the middle, chopping things up. So it feels like a montage that has not fully been edited into a montage format. Even in scenes that do feel more montage like the Vegas scene where it's playing Greatest Day and they're in the pool running and they're in the pool splashing each other, and they're in the lobby of the hotel kissing. And even in that sequence, there's a little bit of a slowness to the montage, where every single clip takes its time, and it doesn't quite feel like it's edited rhythmically to conventionally make us go along with the idea of what a montage does. But that's used really well throughout the film. And beyond that, it's just strong editing altogether. I mean, there's not much you can say about stuff that's just serviceable. But for the most part, it's just doing exactly what it needs to, cutting at the right time, showing the right people on screen at the right time, and creating a great rhythm for this.
I think that last point that you said kind of encapsulates how I feel about the editing as well. It's this Sean Baker style you talked about in direction, and I think it carries over to editing as well. A lot of his films have that vibey feel where you're not spending super quick moments with stuff, but you're also not there for too long, and it's very rhythmic, like you said. And the first half of this movie really flies by to me. I paused on this most recent rewatch to look at what the timestamp was post-invasion sequence, and it was like an hour inside the film, and it felt like the movie had only been going on for like 20 minutes. So to me, that's a sign of like truly great editing and pacing.
The pacing is definitely the key word for me here, and I think we all know by now that Best Picture nominees are often just nominated in this category, but this is one where I truly do feel it's deserved. Uh, as you mentioned, also, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but Sean Baker is the editor, obviously, on this film, and so when they say it's a Sean Baker film, they really mean it. The way he navigates you through these tonal changes in this movie and so smoothly is really impressive. And also his signature that you described earlier, Matt, the fact that when you watch a Sean Baker film, you know what a Sean Baker film is, and that's because he edits his own movies. He has that control, and he knows that the movie won't be a Sean Baker movie unless he gets in the editing room. How many times do you hear visions get pulled away from directors because they don't edit? And this guy, they get locked out of the editing room, but this guy has the control of his editing. It's a requirement for him to be signed up to a project. So, yeah, I think it's a fantastic job. I think it's a completely deserving nomination, and I think he might win this.
Something as well, I love the way that the editing shows off the improv of the characters, because although there are so many scenes that are carefully written and crafted, the way that he edits it does make it feel naturalistic and improvised. And there's times when you don't know what is written and what is improvised. And in those montage scenes that I was talking about that aren't really montage, they're edited in a way that it feels like he's just capturing life and showing you small little slivers of moments that are going on here. Rather than we have to show this and we have to show this and we have to show this, and it's going to tell the audience what we need them to know. Instead, he uses these quick cuts and these quick little moments as a way to show the reality of these characters in this world, which is something that I love, and it makes it feel, like we keep saying, like a distinctly Sean Baker movie.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about the fact that Anora could be our eventual Best Picture winner, and typically Best Picture winners have an abundance of nominations. They get a few more than people are expecting, but for the most part, I feel like a lot of people thought that Anora got exactly what it deserved, nothing more but nothing less. But I think there's a few categories where you could have seen it gain some additional nominations. I know we don't have the casting one yet, but this one would definitely be deserving of that if we had it for this year's Oscar. As we've talked about throughout, it's so authentic. Everyone feels like they are their characters. The improv in tandem with the script feels so natural coming from everyone. And I think this will be a thing when we do have this category, kind of like BAFTA. When we have someone who potentially could win an Oscar for acting, casting is a major part of that for giving them the role, unless the role was written for them specifically or they were attached before the screenplay was conceived. But that is one that I would love to see if we had that nomination this year. But I mean, I've talked about my stuff in supporting actor before, but I think another one would be cinematography. I feel like there's a very distinctive and very cool feeling to the camera throughout, and I like the grain. I like how it moves. Would it be my personal 5? Probably not, but it's one of those things where I would like to see it receive a few more precursors, especially over films that were getting a lot of the precursor mentions in cinematography, because it's that type of work that isn't overtly stylish, but is still very great for the film that it's inside of.
When I got done watching the film, I was like, okay, there's not a ton of nominations I could be awarding it. For me, I would say double up another actor in supporting. Personally, I would have enjoyed seeing a double dip in supporting. But I kind of want to ask you guys, do you guys think this is going to win SAG Ensemble? Because I do. I think this is going to win SAG Ensemble.
Yep. Even before the PGA DGA win, I've had it as the SAG Ensemble winner since the nominations were announced. Everything that people were saying of like why Wicked has to win because it got every nomination that it possibly could, Anora did the same. No one expected Yuriy Borisov to make it in at SAG, and there it was. And so this got every nomination. Anything that people say about Complete Unknown or Wicked being strong at SAG could go equally, if not more so, for Anora. So I do think this wins SAG Ensemble.
You claim this room, I claim your sister.
I claim your mom.
If you are ready now, yeah, can take some. Okay, yes, I'm ready now.
Well, Matt, you talk about how SAG loves their veterans, but I love our guest preferential ballots inside of the series. So, Ryan, kick us off. What do you have at number 10?
All right, so my top 10 preferential ballot, I have to put Anora number 1, and then I got Brutalist number 2. I got The Substance at number 3. And number 4, I got Conclave. Number 5, I have Dune Part 2. then I have Nickel Boys, then I have Wicked, and then I have A Complete Unknown, and then I have Amelia Perez, and I did not rank I'm Still Here because I'm watching that tomorrow. So that's oncoming. I can maybe update it with you guys.
Cool lineup there. I mean, Anora number 1. How could you not? How could you not?
My number 1 the entire year, so it's got to be number 1 here.
Before we wrap up here, obviously we're really looking forward to your video where you poll actual Oscar voters, but for everyone out there, how would they find that? Where can they find you?
Oh, you can find all those incredibly nerdy Oscar videos that confuses my mom to no end, but pleases a lot of you people out there. You can find it on my YouTube channel, Brian Castleman. I'm sure they did me a favor and linked it somewhere down below, so you can find me. But yeah, I'm happy to do it, and I'm looking forward to this year because I'm looking forward to seeing what people think about this year's movies.
That's a wrap on episode 5 of our 2025 Best Picture Revisiting series. Here's the current combined leaderboard for both our guest and Matt and I's preferential ballot. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode where Filmball legends will be joining us to discuss The Substance.